we made a case that Houston had tremendous potential, but we were under where we needed to be. And we needed to focus on our talent. We needed to create collisions more. We needed to have more venture capital and resources. We needed to scale startups more. So we released the strategy. And a strategy is just paper, as you know. It's what you do to execute that. So we stood up a nonprofit called Houston Exponential. We brought kind of the mayor's task force, the innovation roundtable, the Houston Technology Center, all those things together into Houston Exponential. Rice stepped forward and started to build the ION. We launched the Houston Exponential Venture Fund, which has been wildly successful. Started attracting accelerators like Mass Challenge and Greentown Lab. They all involve people who really stepped forward and put their own touch on it. And those things have come together and I think really helped propel Houston to kind of a different category than we were then.
Welcome to Forging the Future. And I'm excited to have Brian Richards on the podcast today. He's known for helping the most senior leaders at large corporations drive greater innovation and digital technologies. He is currently the innovation lead for Accenture in the South Market and the managing director for Accenture's Houston Innovation Hub. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chris. Great to be here.
Looking forward to our conversation today. So tell me a little bit about how you got here in Houston. How did you land?
So my story starts in 2015. So I actually had been coming to Houston for several years before that, doing work for the energy industry. And never really thought I'd come here, to be honest. All my friends would be like, man, go to Austin, you go to San Francisco, go somewhere where there's innovation. Don't go to Houston. But I really wanted to build an innovation hub for Accenture. And when you're building something like that, you want to be where the clients are. You want to be where the demand is. And Houston really had that. So my wife and I came down here and we kind of fell in love. We liked it a lot. The people were super nice. The amenities were nice. The weather at that time in the middle of the winter was nice, right? And so we were super excited and moved here in 2015. And just got embraced by so many people, and including the Greater Houston Partnership and others from Accenture, and just fit right in. So we've loved it.
Where were you coming from?
So we lived in Chicago for a decade. In the city, we lived in Lincoln Park. So it was a huge shift, to be clear. And before that, I had gone to school at Notre Dame. So we lived in Indiana for 4 years. But I grew up in Mississippi. So I feel like I'm kind of coming back to the South, and that's been fun.
Well, we're happy to have you back. Just before COVID hit, too. You had a few years before that.
At 5 years, yeah. We got a little time in.
Yeah. I still haven't made it out to the lab. I need to see it. Is it open now?
It is definitely open. We should definitely have you. We have many different things. We help clients really experience new technologies, how they're going to use that in their business. And so whether that's things like Gen AI or 5G or blockchain or topics like that. And we have what I like to call the 5Ds working on that. So developers, the hackers and hoodies, designers, the jeans and tattoos, domain experts, the suits, delivery experts, the assholes with the timeline and the budget, and then the data scientists, the nerds in the corner. And we bring them together to help clients kind of explore and experience these technologies and find value for them.
Which D are you?
I'm in a suit. So take that for what it is.
Well, I mean, you did come here and you've been very involved in the Houston innovation community. Maybe elaborate a little bit more about once you did land here, what you spearheaded. You mentioned GHP, Houston. There was Houston Exponential. I know you were involved with.
Yeah. So when I came in 2015, I had the extreme honor to meet Gina Luna, who was the chair of the GHP, who's actually just honored today for all of her contributions to the city of Houston. But what she was trying to lead up at the time was something we called the Innovation Roundtable, which was, what does Houston need to do for its startup ecosystem, for venture capital, and really for its innovation economy? And, we talked about it and looked at it. And when I told her what I was doing in building this innovation hub and, kind of my reasons for coming to Houston, she was pretty insistent of, I want you to help us drive this and get Accenture involved. And so we committed to leading an innovation strategy for the city. And we really looked at Houston not as we wanted it to be, but as it was. And as someone who had literally just moved here, I was able to kind of look at the city as it is versus what we wanted it to be. And we talked to CEOs, we talked to entrepreneurs, we talked to venture capitalists, we talked to the different universities. And it was really interesting how, depending on who you talk to, we were either the most innovative city in the world, we're drilling in deep water, we're landed on the moon, we invented the lithium-ion battery, or we were the least innovative city in the world, right? And I won't list all the reasons as to what people gave there. But the end result was that we made a case that Houston had tremendous potential, but we were under where we needed to be. And we needed to focus on our talent. We needed to create collisions more. We needed to have more venture capital and resources. We needed to scale startups more. So we released the strategy. And a strategy is just paper, as you know. It's what you do to execute that. And so we stood up a nonprofit called Houston Exponential. We brought kind of the mayor's task force, the innovation roundtable, the Houston Technology Center, if you remember that, all those things together into Houston Exponential. Rice stepped forward and started to build the ION. We launched the Houston Exponential Venture Fund, which has been wildly successful. Started attracting accelerators like Mass Challenge and Greentown Labs and folks like that. All these things were part of the plan, but they all involved people who really stepped forward and put their own touch on it. And those things have come together and I think really helped propel Houston over the last 8-10 years into kind of a different category than we were then.
So would you say you were like an intrapreneur at Accenture? Is this something that Accenture was actually trying to encourage, starting up innovation labs in different parts of the country?
No.
Or how did you actually say, hey, I want to create a lab and I want to do it in Houston? How does everyone feel about that?
Yeah. I was told no a lot, right? So I am, I think, an entrepreneur at heart. I just like operating with big businesses. So it's just a different feel. But, the background here was I was doing innovation for the energy industry on things like drones or 3D printing or video analytics. And it was primarily me flying around to Calgary or Perth, Australia, or Singapore, or whatever the case is, doing these projects, but they weren't scalable. Because every time I'd have to bring the team together and we do this one-off thing and then the team would disperse. And so in 2013, I started pushing for building an innovation hub. And it's like, no, that sounds like money. That sounds expensive. What if we just put some demos in the corner, some demos in the kitchen? What if we just hung a banner, anything, but let's, build a team. And finally, in 2015, it was, but maybe if you move here. And so then I moved here. And then in 2016, we got a yes. And at that point, it was like, let's put a hole in the wall as fast as we can so we can get in construction and no one can stop us. And we grew from a few thousand square feet and a few people to over 100 folks and about 30,000 square feet now. And everything about it felt like building a startup, right? How you're going to organize, what your metrics are going to be, how do you make money, what's your product market fit, what brand are you building around, all those kinds of things. So to build that in parallel with trying to build the city and the city's infrastructure was just a tremendous privilege, right? And they were symbiotic. It was beneficial to Accenture to be out in the market and working with startups and entrepreneurs, and vice versa. I think it was helpful for the startups and entrepreneurs and venture capitalists to have a big company like an Accenture saying, look, this is a place you want to be. This is a lot happening here.
So speaking as an intrapreneur at a company like Accenture, how do you think you tip the scale then for them to finally see your vision and fund that vision?
I mean, every company, whether you're big or you're small, they want to make money and they want to grow, right? And so you have to speak the language of growth. It's not about, wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't it be great for our people? Wouldn't it be impactful? I mean, it has to have a financial return and opportunity. And so at this time, all of the digital wave was coming. And part of the argument was, Houston is a huge market for Accenture. We have many employees, we have lots going on. But we needed to do more to bring innovation to especially the resources clients that sit in Houston. And we were doing amazing things in consumer products and retail, in life science companies and so forth. So how do we get that in Houston? And that's going to require investment. And if we do this, then that's going to drive growth. And that's exactly what happened. And once the money starts flowing in, once you start to see the growth, once you see clients say, this is amazing, then it's a heck of a lot easier to get people on board.
Did you have to pitch internally, just like a startup would have to pitch to an investor?
I did. Mm-hmm. I did. In fact, it's even, I wouldn't say it's harder, but it's just, if you pitch as an entrepreneur to a venture capitalist and they don't like your pitch, you go to the next venture capitalist. But in a company, if you pitch and your boss says absolutely not, and you go around them and go pitch someone else, that can be a career limiting move, right? So you have to be very thoughtful in terms of how you build these coalitions. And at the end of the day, you've got to get people on board with your vision, just like an entrepreneur would. And you have to want them to invest not just their money, right, but also to invest their time, their political capital, and so forth, to want to support you. And, when a few senior leaders do that, it makes a world of difference.
And Accenture is what, 750,000 people now? It's a huge company.
It is huge.
Yeah, just a little bit bigger than Softtech, maybe 2,000 times bigger.
You'll get there.
We're working on it, yeah. So speaking of which, Accenture, being a 750,000 person company, what does Accenture do exactly?
We're a huge company, and we operate around the world. And as you said, we're quite large. But really, we help clients with a few things. We help them with strategy and consulting. So this is what's their future business strategy, helping them with M&A, change management and consulting in that way, functional consulting, everything that you would expect from traditional strategy and consulting. Second, we help them with technology. So implementing large technology platforms like a Microsoft or a Amazon or Adobe or Workday or Salesforce or things like that, SAP. We have literally huge groups of people who are helping implement these for companies to drive greater efficiencies and so forth. We then help with what we call SONG, which is marketing and advertising. So we work with chief marketing officers to create everything from Super Bowl commercials. There'll be some this year, actually, on this year's Super Bowl, all the way through to their brand strategy, their digital products, and things of that nature. And then we have operations. So we operate for clients big pieces of their business, right? So we call it operations, but running things like their help desk or their finance divisions or things like that, their human resources groups, things like that. So really, it's end-to-end capability to transform a business and help them achieve a higher level of performance and operate better.
Which would make sense that innovation is a key part of that, right?
Yeah, innovation, Accenture literally comes from accent on the future. It's those two words come together. So we're always looking at the future. But I think, the innovation piece comes from every big company is disrupted by new waves of change. Technology change, geopolitical change, market changes and dynamics. And what we are really good at is helping them navigate that change and to embrace all of that potential and to transform themselves to be a higher performing business. And so from an innovation standpoint, that means creating new products and services. That means finding new customers. That means solving things in a different way. And, that has really why I, have stayed at the company for 18 years now is it's always something new, always a new challenge to go solve.
And you're right. A lot of businesses are getting disrupted that really didn't even have to worry about hardware and software before, and suddenly they have to be a hardware or software company, or they're going to, get disrupted out of business. Everything from toilets on up. And so it's going to be an interesting 10 years, I think.
I'm fond of telling people to imagine your life 150 years ago. Okay, so it's what is that? 1874, right? What did you not have, Chris? Nothing, right? You didn't have electricity, internal plumbing. There wasn't, you lived and died in the same place. There was no immunizations. 150 years is not that long. You're talking about 2 human lifetimes and everything has changed. And even if you think 15 years ago, back to 2009, the iPhone had just come out. Netflix was a DVD mailed to your house, right? You had to go to a bank to deposit a check. You had to talk to someone at the airline to change your seat. Just in the last 15 years, things change quickly. And that pace of change builds on itself. And by definition, that means that today is the slowest day of the rest of your life, right? And so you have to keep changing. And, if you stop, by definition, the whole world's going to pass you by. And so, really from an innovation perspective, a lot of what I spend my time doing is talking to senior leaders who've been very successful building a company, building their capabilities. But, they can never stand still, and they have to continue to push forward, look for what's best, and continue to drive forward, or else they will get left behind.
Yeah, I think the challenge is for a lot of people, they can only think linearly and they don't think exponentially, right? And so they think things are much further away than they actually are. And you're right, the change, like in my lifetime, right? And if I wanted some information, I had to go to the library, look up in a card catalog, try to understand Dewey Decimal System, try to find a book, hope the book's on the shelf, go find the book on the shelf, and then hope the answer is in the book, right? Whereas now it's just like, ask a question that's at your fingertips.
Yeah. I mean, in a human career, 40 years, right? Let's say technology is improving at 10%. It's probably improving faster. So you're getting a doubling every 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
Then after 40 years, you're talking about that it has changed 40 times in that amount of time. And so humans are very bad at grasping exponential change, right?
Given the fact that I started my programming career storing my programs on paper punch tape and paper cards, right?
Yeah.
And here we are where we're at now. Or then when we talk about 150 years, or if you look at like when the Wright brothers flew and when we landed on the moon, it's like an 80-year time period. I mean, it's just incredible actually to try to get your head around the fact that much progress was made in that amount of time. And the Apollo spacecraft ran on what would be a calculator today.
Yeah.
Right. And so this is the power of not thinking linearly, and people thinking we're not going to have self-driving cars in 10 years, or we're not going to have robots in 10 years. This stuff is really happening. 10 years is 100 years, right, in that timeline. So that leads into really, as managing director of Accenture's Houston Innovation Lab and Hub, maybe you could share how you're working with these startups that are creating the future. I mean, how are you trying to equip them for this new future we're talking about?
So, I mean, so at Accenture, our Accenture Innovation Group, we have R&D, we have ventures, which is where we work with startups. We have incubation, we have hubs, our what if teams. There's many different capabilities that kind of come together as part of something like this. When you're working with startups, the biggest thing a startup needs is they need problems. They need problems and they need customers. And so Accenture, we work with so many large companies. We see those problems. And we know where the customers are. And we see not just at an individual company level, but really industry systemic type problems. So the biggest thing we can do for startups is connect the problems to them where they have relevant technology or relevant innovation and bring them into that. And you can have great success on that. I, though, like to always remind startups that you will go bankrupt waiting on large companies to make decisions, okay? It is the reality, and you have to kind of go into it knowing, like, do not count on a Fortune 500 company to come through in the period of time that you're hoping.
My analogy is always like, as a startup, I'm this little speedboat kind of circling an aircraft carrier that's trying to turn very slowly, or just like the fruit fly, and they're like, yeah, come back to us. It's like, well, I might be dead by then. I mean, by the time you guys make a decision, right?
It is absolutely the case, right? And so you have to go into it with a sales channel or sales model that allows you to have many targets with minimal time to try to sell them to get that channel. And again, someone like an Accenture can be helpful there. Or you have to really understand kind of the procurement process and who makes the decisions and where the money sits. And I think a lot of times people think they're talking to the company when they're not. They're talking to an individual at the company who has processes and bosses and all sorts of things that they have to go through. So understanding who you're talking to and what power they really have and what influence they really have is super critical as you're trying to sell to them.
So if I'm a startup, how do I get into the hub, or how do you find startups that are going to solve some of these big company problems?
Yeah, so we go through the Houston community. So we're at the Ion, we'll go to Greentown Labs, we'll work with some of the different accelerators and so forth, right? So we go to more of those types of channels. And then we have people who are part of our ventures organization who are scouting specific segments and challenges. So whether that's a technology segment that they're going off looking for the leading startups, again, they'll work with typically venture capitalists or others who are curating those kind of best of breed. Or we'll be in geographies and we'll be in, say the city of Houston looking for, what are the right ones. We do invest in companies. We have a venture arm, corporate venture capital arm, but we're trying to find companies less for capital appreciation. So it's less about, how much, money are we going to make off of the capital appreciation of a company, and more about, is this someone we can partner with who's going to help drive our client's business and our core business that we can build around. And so that's, something a little bit different from us than potentially other CVCs.
So when you bring the startup in, you may or may not invest in them. They're working on some particular technology. How do you marry that to those Fortune 100 companies or 500 companies that you're working with? Like, hey, here's something we think you could use.
So, we have account teams. All big consulting firms tend to have this, right? We have account teams who are working with specific clients who really know them, their problems, et cetera. And so whenever they have large bids or large programs they're working on, we're going to come with a solution. And a lot of it will be Accenture technology and, IP and so forth. But, let's say there was a supply chain aspect of it. Well, we may work with our venture arm to say, what are the best, startups out there in the supply chain space that we should really be bringing into this? Or have you seen anyone who's super deep on, 3D printing in aerospace, or, so this kind of these esoteric topics. And the venture crew will go off. They've got a database of all these things. They will say, hey, we've got this great company. We think this will be one. And it's a matchmaking process. And so we'll look to bring them into those RFPs and those bids. And the ones that are successful tend to be repeat plays, and ones that's like, let's do this again and again. And they scale and we scale with them.
So as we think about building for the future, one of the topics that we're both very passionate about is AI. So what are you doing in that area for AI and generative AI at Accenture?
It would be a really hot take to say that generative AI is not a topic of conversation. It is obviously in the top of every senior leader's mind. Accenture announced, and I'm helping co-lead a series of generative AI studios across North America, right, including one here in Houston that's part of our innovation hub. And when you talk to clients about generative AI, there is tremendous opportunity. There's tons of what could be. There's also a lot of questions about, is this another hype cycle type thing? Is this something that's just going to be like the metaverse or blockchain, or something where you say, hey, the impact was not really as great as we thought. On a personal level, I do believe it's going to be quite transformational. I think anyone who's played around with any of the tools that are out there would say that it's kind of an iPhone-like moment where you're like, this is something that is powerful. But there's still so much that's unknown. So for a client who's looking at this, they're trying to think through, what are the big use cases? Where is this going to create value? Where can I start with this? What are the risks? Are there intellectual property risk if I upload my data and train models off of this? What if it gives the wrong answer and hallucinates and somebody gets killed, right? I mean, these are real questions people have, and they're right to question it. And so you have to bake in kind of a responsible AI approach to this as well in terms of what the answers are. But, we're exploring all those questions with all the largest players you would imagine. And it's just super exciting space, but we're in like the first out of the first inning of this, right? I mean, we're at the very, very beginning. And so, what gives me a lot of excitement as I look at this is just what's coming over the next 10, 15 years. And we really try to embrace this human and machine type approach, right? That it's not us or the machine. It's not us versus the machine. It's how do you augment your skills and capabilities? I started my career as a developer, right? And I think you did too. And so as you did that, new tools have come out to make developers more productive and have better development environments and be able to find,
Copilot, et cetera.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Now you have Copilot. Now you have the ability to generate code from scratch for what you're trying to go do. It's another evolution in that journey. But that productivity boost is going to be huge for the clients. It's going to be huge for the U.S. economy. So I am just very optimistic of what the next decade holds around it.
Well, it is interesting. I mean, I've been in the industry for quite a long time as well. And of course, everyone was always talking about machine learning and AI and everything for like the last 30, 40 years, actually, right? But it's only been in the last few years where it's suddenly become real and also immediately useful. Right.
Yeah.
And you don't need to know Python and you don't need to know how to train a large language model. You don't need to know a programming language now. You only need to know English,
Yeah.
right? To interact with this new AI and really get information that's useful today,
Yeah.
right? For so many things. And you're right. It's hard to imagine that it's just inning one, out one, but we really are there,
Yeah.
right? But it is still useful, but what it's going to be able to do is going to be really
What
amazing.
it is, and I mean, I tell people all the time to remember it's not magic, it's
Mhm.
math, right? And when you really peel it back, you're talking about probabilities. You're talking about different ways of expressing basically math and machine learning and the things that you talked about. But that means that there's limitations. It's going to be just as biased as what it's trained on. It can make up answers, which we know, and that creates a lot of risk. And I think one of the things I'm very passionate about on this kind of space is not only the responsible AI side, but what this means for Houston. Houston missed the digital wave 2 decades ago, and we've been playing catch up ever since, like we were talking about earlier. And I am determined, as are many others, right, to ensure that we recognize the potential this has for Houston, but also the importance of us embracing this, because it affects every industry. It's not just you have the largest chip companies or those kinds of things. It is going to change the energy industry. It is going to change the space industry. It's going to change the way healthcare is done and life sciences and research. And so everything, all the large businesses in Houston will be transformed. And if we don't have the talent, the technology, the skill sets, the capabilities here, by definition, they will be forced to go elsewhere to find that, and it could hinder our growth. So want to make sure we're at the leading edge of it.
Well, right. And leaning into those things that we already do very well and applying AI to those domains, I think is key for us to really capitalize on it rather than just generically being like an AI city or something, right?
Correct. We have to lean into our strengths. We have to lean into what we're really good at. And, you've had many guests on, good friends of mine, who have pointed out that we solve the scale problems. We solve the hard problems. That's going to still be true. One of my favorite quotes is from Bezos. He goes, it's impossible to build a business on what's changing. You have to build a business on what's staying the same. And, if people are going to want packages faster, people are going to want energy cheaper and more reliably, people are going to want more and better health, right? All of these things are still going to be true, and Houston will stay true to that identity. But we're going to transform those businesses in the decades to come, leveraging all of this AI. And it's going to be a sight to behold.
I think you're right with the key too, that it's not AI replacing people, it's AI with people. It's like, how do we apply AI to reading an X-ray and highlighting areas that maybe the doctor should focus in on, and then the doctor still reads the X-ray,
Yeah.
right? And you don't just depend on it 100%. So it's really augmenting us to do a better job, and be more productive.
Yeah, I mean, with 3 young kids, I often wonder what the career their careers will look like, or what will this be an existential threat that they won't ever have jobs or things like that. But I think what it really forces is what makes us human, what makes us better. And I don't worry that they will be replaced by a machine, but I do worry that another person with a machine could replace something that they were doing. And so I want to build the skill sets in them that are future-proof. And that's things like creativity, ability to take risk, ability to work and bring together a network of people. Those softer skills, those mindsets and those approaches are going to be, I think, in the 21st century, or for the rest of the 21st century, kind of the distinguishing characteristics more than what you've learned, your specific knowledge in a given subject or so forth, because so much of that will be accessible, automated in many different ways.
And so much more useful. I mean, think of a doctor having to learn all that over a 20-year period when half of his knowledge is already out of date, right?
Yeah.
So interesting. Okay, given that AI is going to be such a big deal over the next 10 years, how do you think companies should prepare if they want to be innovators in their industries?
Yeah, it's a great question, Chris. I mean, in the hub, we have a wall of quotes from CEOs, of Blockbuster, of Palm. You may be seeing where this is going, right? They were quotes from CEOs on earnings calls where they were so confident in what the future was going to hold, right? That they were unconcerned with the need to change. And so, when I'm talking to senior leaders, we're talking about why does innovation matter, right? It matters because no matter if you've been the most successful company or the least successful company, you are only as good as where you're at right now. There's a great quote from Winston Churchill: "Success is not final, failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts." And so for every senior leader, if you're not taking risk, if you're not pushing into new areas, if your people aren't waking up every day trying to find a better way to go do it, somebody else is. And the market, as you well know, is brutally competitive. You have to be continuing to move forward. However, we tend to look at that as patents and skill sets and certificates. It's not about that. It's about mindsets of taking risks. It's about bringing people with diverse backgrounds together. It's about giving them the funding and the sponsorship to go and pursue big, bold things that are going to make a real impact on the company. And then it's about scaling the winners. And, I talk to so many folks who say, hey, I have more pilots than United Airlines, right? I got things, POCs and pilots and so forth. No one gets paid off of pilots, right? You need scale. You need real change that gets down to your customers, that's going to drive real value. And so, you want your entire C-suite, your people waking up every day trying to get those new products and services out to the market. And if they're not, then again, you're falling behind.
So basically embracing that drive toward innovation.
I think so, right? And I think more than ever, the C-suite of today has to have these growth mindsets. We do a lot of work with my team on we call growth cultures, which is building mindsets and cultures within the C-suite of taking risk and of building new things. Most people who become senior leaders in companies have had the growth beaten out of them. They're managers, right? They're good at managing large, complex processes and systems. Managing a company is a way to manage its decline. You want to grow right? You want to grow the company. That requires a different mindset and a different approach to, get where you want to go.
I often joke about it as I've gone in my career from, managing to senior management CEO. It feels like from a technology standpoint, I'm getting a lobotomy every time, right?
Yes.
So it's basically you have to try to do what you can to kind of ward off that lobotomy. All right, last question. So how are you, Brian, forging the future?
It's it's one of those things when you look at kind of my whole career, it's all been about the future, right? I mean, literally my life's work is innovation. And, when you kind of stop, take a look back and you think about all the things you've done and whatnot, you say, what impact have I had? What does it really matter? I feel like I can be really proud of being involved in creating the future. But one of the things that I love to do is to look to the past. And so if by day I'm looking at the future, then at night I'm looking at the past. So I study history. I look at ancient exploration. I taught myself celestial navigation. I build sundials. Like I do things that are, really old school. And part of the reason I do that is that there's so much we can learn about embracing new technologies by looking at historical examples and what people have done in the past. And, there's nothing new under the sun. Yes, people 300 years ago didn't have Gen AI, but they had greed, they had competitiveness, they had all the things that go into markets today. And so, I study that past, and that past helps me forge the future. That's how I really get my inspiration for, being thoughtful about new technologies, how to think of deploying them, how to think of scaling them, kind of separating hype from reality, building effective teams, those kinds of things.
I like that. Having an eye toward the past with a eye toward the future, right? And building on, basically history repeats itself, right? So there's a lot to learn from the past. And like you said, a lot of the problems are still the same, but applying innovative solutions to that.
Yeah. I mean, as we mentioned, 150 years, a lot of change, right? And so because of that, humans can't even really understand a lot of times. We abstract away. It's just like software development. You have to abstract away the underpinning things. So we abstract away the energy system. We abstract away steel. We abstract away navigation, all these things where we don't have to worry about it because it just works. But they're just fascinating to really understand. And so again, I highly encourage folks who do spend a lot of time thinking about the future, maybe whether you're building a business or otherwise, but it's worth studying the past as well.
Interesting. Well, I really enjoyed this conversation, Brian. I'm going to take you up on that offer to tour the lab. Sounds like a really interesting place.
You got it.
And something that I would enjoy. I do have something for you here. Some socks, programming socks, actually. Since you do have a programming background.
Yeah, is there a hidden message in this binary here?
I haven't decoded the binary myself. I'd be disappointed if it didn't have a message. So let me know.
I will let you know. We actually hid messages in the hub with binary, right?
I do stuff like that. I love those little puzzles on the wall, and some people figure it out. Some people are just oblivious, right?
Absolutely.
What's going on.
Well, thanks for having me, Chris.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
Thank you, Brian.